Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third evening of our Diocesan Formation Days, and which tonight we will be listening about the topic, State and Memorial Planning. And to start the night, I'd like to invite Father Dominic to lead us in prayer. I say hello as well and welcome on behalf of Bishop Jensen to those of you who are connected with us via welcome to the third evening of our Diocesan Formation Days, and which tonight we will be listening about the topic, State and Memorial Planning. And to start the night, I'd like to invite Father Dominic to lead us in prayer. I say hello as well and welcome on behalf of Bishop Jensen to those of you who are connected with us.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
God of mercy, we thank you for this evening gathering. We praise you, invite you to be in our midst. Let the speaker endow him with your wisdom from above. Also pray for our listeners that, Lord, we benefit this encounter. We pray for those who are listening from elsewhere, and put them together as we listen to this encounter. Lord, you lead us to go out this evening to share. We pray you continue to be with us until the end, and we let us be the glory that you need from us. Lord, we add this and other years to our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father. As mentioned, the topic for tonight is about state and memorial planning. And upon the invitation of Bishop Jensen, our speaker comes to us. Our speaker is Peter Nobes. He's from the Archdiocese of Vancouver, parishioner of Christ the Redeemer Parish, and a director of the Catholic cemeteries in the Archdiocese. And so without much further ado, I welcome State and Memorial Planning.
Thank you, Father.
Comes to us.
In front of you, just make sure everybody has this, you have two handouts which we're going to follow, and there's a guide. And for those at home, this guide is available off the Catholic Cemetery's website, right off the home page. So the Roman Catholic Cemeteries of the Archdiocese of Vancouver. So it's available for download electronically. Alrighty, so a couple of things just to build on. Is the municipality. So we'll talk a bit about that, answer some questions, and share some information. Okay, I'm a cemetery guy, or what's called in the industry a cemeterian. And sometimes I feel for the seminarians before they became priests, because I sometimes call them cemeterians instead of calling them seminarians. Anyways, okay, so just to preface this, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a financial planner, but I've been through many of these things, and I've lost both my in-laws in the last 2 years. Okay, so I've been through some estate work supporting my wife with this. So I'll share a little bit of wisdom. And sometimes I feel for the seminarian. If there is there anyone here a notary? Cemeterians work with legal? Okay. So let's go through it. So in terms of what we'll cover, basics of will preparation, reducing fees and taxes, basics of planned giving, healthcare representation. What's the health authority here called? Northern Health or something like that? Okay. All right. Pre-need planning, then we'll talk a bit about pre-arranging cemetery space and pre-arranging your funeral services. So let's go through it. So in terms of okay, so in front of you is a planning guide. This is a gift, real gift to you. If you have a will already and you're updating your will, this is a handy tool. Or if you don't have a will and you're doing a will for the first time, this will save you a lot of time and money. Because one of the first things a lawyer or a notary public is going to ask you is you're going to have to list out all of your assets and odds and ends. Okay, so this gives you full of worksheets, provides a bit of guidance on estate planning and the importance of it. It gathers your personal information about your dependents, if applicable, information about your assets, that sort of stuff. So my will is 20 years old, so I'm standing in front of you not being the best advocate, but my will is out of date, so I've decided I need to update it. So I've been using this actually to gather a bunch of information so that when I'm ready to update the will, it'll be done. So that's here. The other two things are the presentations themselves if you want to make notes. Does anybody need a pen or anything like that? You all set? Okay, and before we start, we're going to have a fun part of the evening. We just named a new section at our cemetery after Holy Angels. So I have 2 books, and we're going to pass around a piece of paper, and if you put your name in this container, we'll do a draw for His Angels at Our Side books. This is written by Father Horgan, and it's a beautiful, beautiful piece. So if you could do that. And someone please remind me to do that at the end so I don't forget. Okay? Just all right. A new section at our cemetery after. Making a will is an act of evangelization. It really is an act of stewardship for your family. It helps you provide your in financial instructions in the event of your death or when your death occurs. So it's an important document to pursue. Can someone please remind me? Why make a will? It's a document that you specify the method to be applied in the management and distribution of your estate after death. It particularly applies to your financial instructions. If you do not have a will, what happens? You will die in what's called intestate, which essentially means without a will. So the challenge is that if anybody goes to do banking or anything of that nature, without a will, it triggers off a process where the government, where there will be a search for a will, and if there's no will, the state will assign a lawyer to be the executor of the person's estate, and the estate will be distributed on the laws of British Columbia. So the estate will be, and that may not be the way you want your estate distributed, right? And you will likely have to pay more taxes. So making a will allows you to be intentional with the distribution of your assets and in a way that is best for your family circumstances. Okay, a couple things to think about. You need to be thinking about who's going to be my executor. We recommend you have a primary executor and a secondary executor. In case your primary executor cannot do the job. Someone who could be a guardian. There are 2 types of guardianship we'll talk about. First one is for children, if that's applicable. The second one is guardian of assets. So let's say, as an example, you own a revenue property or an apartment building or something like that. What would be required is who would take care of the property, thinking about who would take care of the executor. So that's guardianship. You have a primary need to be listing your assets, thinking about your assets. In case your primary probate taxes, we'll talk about that in a moment. Donations. One of the reasons we do this because we ask people to please consider a gift to the church, a gift to the parish, a gift to one of the ministries of the church. There are many. You need to be thinking about a power of attorney. So a power of attorney is someone who can do your banking, to do financial transactions. Let's say you have to go on hospital taxes, we'll talk about that in a moment, pay your bills, donations of that nature. One of the reasons we power of attorney, when there's a death, the power of attorney no longer continues, if the executor takes over, gives to one of the ministries. Healthcare representation, so I'm going to point you to a link that provides some forms and things, because you need to be thinking, if I get sick, who would look out for me? Who would be maybe a care advocate for me in the hospital? Let's say if you have a spouse, that's great. If you have a family member who lives close, that's great. But if you don't, perhaps there's someone from your parish who could be a care advocate for you. So those are things to be consciously thinking about. I'm going to tell you a quick story about two people in my life. When I first moved to Vancouver from Montreal, I was a young man and I was 26 years old. And I didn't know anybody. I moved in January. It was raining in Vancouver. It was dark. Yeah, you know, it was kind of gross. And I had a job that I was on the road, so I didn't have an office environment where I was meeting people. And along the way, I met a neighbor, a 72-year-old retired school teacher who was wonderful, wonderful. Her name was Mary, and I really credit Mary with triggering to get me back into my faith at the time. Mary became my best friend. We went out for fish and chips. We drank lots of wine. She had an incredible wit and sense of humor. Mary got sick. She went into the hospital, and she only had one sibling in England who could not come over to help care for her and look out for her while she was sick. So I, by default, became a care advocate for Mary. So that's the first thing to think about. If you have to go in a hospital, who is going to look out for your interests? Right? You really need someone who's kind of looking out for your interests, right? Taken care of. The readings were done and everything. So Mary died. I tell you that story because beautifully prepared. And then I had another experience. My neighbor a couple of years ago had two sons, my next door neighbor. Strange relationships. We could call her a prickly personality, if you will. So her sons didn't come to the house very often, so I would often cut her grass or pick up some groceries for her. So often we would have a cup of tea and I'd ask her, is there anything I can help you with? She had 3 chronic illnesses. She was not very healthy. And every time I brought up the subject of reconnecting her with her parish, she would not be interested in. And then when I talked about, are you prepared? Do you have a will? Is there anything I can help you with? Because you're not terribly well, you've been in and out of the hospital. And she would deny it. I don't want to talk about it, no thanks. Another time, another time, another time. She went on, she died. The 2 sons did not know what she wanted for her funeral, and they did not know what her burial preference was. The house was stuck in probate for 2 years, so they couldn't sell the house. And worse than that, she just died without any peace. She died in a great state of anxiety. So my hope for you is to be like Mary, to take the time to prepare your plans, to discuss these things with your family, so that they're prepared. So that you're prepared spiritually, mentally, and practically, but also that your children or your family and your executor are well prepared for that. All right, how do you choose an executor? Oops. Consider someone who's younger, trustworthy, capable, good communicator, perhaps financially savvy, someone who's capable of doing banking, those sort of things, cool under pressure. Family, you could think about family, yes or no. Often people don't have family because they think that, by having one sibling, one son or daughter do it, it's going to create tension. So that's always a possibility. If it is a non-family member, the executor does deserve to get compensated. Being an executor is a lot of work. If it's not too much, if it's a small estate, it's upwards of 5%. The larger the estate value, the lower the percentage of compensation for that person. Okay? Does anybody know what the exact amount is? I know it's up to 5%. No? Okay. Okay, we talked about guardianship. So guardianship of children, guardianship of estate. In the case of a couple, if you're in a car accident, God forbid, who would take care of the children? What are your wishes for your children? Who would take care of them? Where do you want them to go to school? What sort of things do you want a provision for them? Estate we talked about, the most common one is a revenue property that's rented out. you know, there's an accident, you die tomorrow. By the way, about 10% of us die in accidents. So everybody thinks it's old age only. No, old age is the predominant way that we die, but there are also accidents that occur, unfortunately. So in our faith, we're called to be prepared for the hour of your death, which can be any time. So. Okay, list out your assets, jewelry, real estate, money, stocks, bonds, artwork, all that sort of stuff. You need to be listing that stuff out. In this day and age, you need to be thinking about your digital property. So, sure. So if you wrote a book and you have the rights to the book, you have rights to that intellectual property. I think it's 60 years after you die. Who's that going to be passed on to? Digital property, you know, downloading books, movies, music, that's digital property, so you want to list out who that goes. The other reason I mention this is think of how many passwords we have. So it can be nuts, right? So when there's a death in the family and someone's got a Facebook profile, you kind of like to put a notice up there that says, you know, there's been a death, sorry, or take it down or whatever. So what I've done with my passwords is I have a file at home. My wife's the executor for me, and I'm for her. And in there I have passwords. So I have a file that's got my will, even though it's 20 years old, it's in there. And I got put passwords in there as well. So that's just something for you to think about as well. Okay, probate. Let's talk about probate. Probate is a legal process that confirms the appointment of an executor and the validity of a will. Is it necessary? No. When my wife's father and mother passed away in the last 2 years, in each case, they had done some planning up front. And they had done joint tenancy on the house and joint tenancy on the bank accounts and assets. So she didn't have to pay any probate tax. However, if your estate is going to a non-family member in particular, your estate is subject to tax, probate tax. With proper planning, it can be minimized or avoided altogether. Is it required? Absolutely. It is required by law. Okay? The other thing to be aware of is that there is a fee. So there's a $200 application fee, and then there's a sliding scale based on the value of the estate. What's the average house price here is what, about $300,000, right? I think it's like that, something like that. So the reason we kind of mention this to people because a lot of people are sitting on $1 million home in Vancouver, and if you have to pay probate tax on $1 million home at 1.4%, that's $14,000. So if you have a house here worth $300,000 and $400,000, you need to have $6,000 to $7,000 of liquid capital to pay that at the time of the death.
Can I ask you a question about probate?
Yeah.
If it's willed to you, you shouldn't have to pay probate, right?
Correct. If it's within a family,
Right.
But it's important that you get a joint tenancy so that you are kind of an owner, co-owner of a house as an
Right.
example or estate.
Being a single person, would you put it, like, as you get older, would you put your kids as that? The co-owner?
So you're single with children?
Adult children.
You have adult children?
Mhm.
And your will is set up, or you want to set up a will to your adult children?
Well, I've got the will all made up and
Sure.
everything, and I just redid it. I just did a codicil because they're old enough now to I changed it up, but
Sure.
and I put them both on it, which is another question, but but actually it's not a question. I was told
Sure.
not to put two people on it, but I thought it would be really good for them to work together to
As
do it.
co-executors?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're
Yeah.
co-executors, they're going to have to work things out,
Yeah.
correct?
Exactly.
And did you set them up as joint tenants?
Not yet, but I was
okay.
just going to ask you if you think that's a good idea. I've been told that because I just buried my dad and
Yeah.
I was the executor, and he put my name on everything as he was, and I was also the power of attorney. So that worked out really easily, but when you're not, then that's when you pay extra.
Yes, and particularly if this is going to a non-family member. But it is important, this is where some counsel comes in with legal, because every person's situation
Right.
will be different, right? But for yours, I think, I would confirm this, but if you put your children on joint tenancy or ownership of your various assets, then that you're essentially, like your dad did with you,
Right.
made you owner of property.
And his bank account, everything.
Everything.
So nothing had to get changed, or everything was just in my name.
Yeah, so you didn't have to pay probate tax, right?
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Bingo, way to go.
But isn't you got to be careful when you,
Sure.
if you're not too old, because then their name's on your bank account. I mean, if you trust them, and you know
Yes.
what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
and then there's taxes, and how does that all work?
Exactly. And that's where you really need the counsel of a one-on-one.
Okay.
Right? I don't know all the answers.
Yeah.
And every person's situation is different.
Yeah. Okay.
What did they define as family?
That's another good question. And we'll talk about that in 1 second. I have a new definition. Well, it's 2 years old. So the question was, what's defined as family now? We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so one of the reasons we do this, we like you to please remember the church. Yes?
Just suggestion that if the people from the floor ask question, because there are people joining us live cast, can you please repeat the question?
Will do.
Thank you.
Okay. So we ask that you remember the church. I want to tell a story. Father at St. Edmund's Parish in North Van, lovely man, had a parishioner who was an altar server in that parish, who enjoyed his whole sacramental journey with the church, and who was at his end of life. And he went to Father, the current Father, who said, I would very much love to give something to the church when I die. And Father said, that's fantastic. We would really appreciate that at the parish. And he went on to die. There was nothing in writing. There was no letter of intent. There was nothing in his will about giving to St. Edmund's. And the man went on to die. Now, the children didn't know the wishes either, because that was never discussed. So what happened is the children ended up making a decision to give some money to the Cancer Society because he died of cancer. Well, he had cancer for 2 years, but he had a 60-year relationship with the parish. So one of the things we ask is that if you please consider the church in your gifting and donations. There are buildings, schools, seminarians, retired priests funds, formation and care of priests, facilities, evangelization efforts, service to the poor. I read through the Called Together brochure, some beautiful, beautiful ministries and services offered up here in the diocese. Yes, Richard?
What is the church's stance in soliciting or requesting donations from people within the congregation? Because some of us have very, good, memories of parishioners who have been very generous to the church, and some of us, have had, not necessarily within the diocese, but church members who were very predatory against our older relatives. So,
in terms of requesting, donation is something that's very personal and it's completely voluntary. So, in terms of, the question is, what's the church's stance on giving or requesting? I guess it is, or so it always needs to be done in an act of mercy and for contributing to the good of the church and to good of the services and mission of the church is probably what I'd say.
okay, I suppose.
Okay.
I may add to that, but once the, let's say, the church is already named on the will, if yet the children are opposed to that, they cannot change it because the church itself receives a copy of the will. And it's the, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, it's the lawyer who gives us a copy of that.
The intention of the will of the person who prepared the will with their legal counsel needs to be respected at the time of death. It can be contested.
In this regard, there was an issue of mental competency with one of my extremely elderly relatives.
Okay.
And her local parish of Jehovah's Witnesses within Ottawa just ran roughshod over the whole will process and basically was set to clean her out before we managed to contest the whole thing and make her rewrite her will, because she has Alzheimer's, and there was an issue of whether or not she really intended to do this.
Good question. So the question on the table was someone related to Richard has Alzheimer's or had some mental competency, and the Jehovah's Witness church was approaching her in
Yes.
an unethical way,
We
perhaps
thought
taking
so.
advantage of the.
Now-
Okay, so
She was a
Sure.
loyal member of the parish,
Sure.
of the parish for her entire life, so it wasn't entirely unexpected, but the degree of, liberty, the degree of solicitation that occurred within the process was rather unexpected.
Sure, we can't speak for the Jehovah's Church.
No, of course not. I'm not asking you to.
Right, but, so it is something for all of us to be careful of. Elder care, being respectful. Every parish I've worked with has done donation requests in a respectful and caring manner. Okay, about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, the definition of a spouse is now someone who've had a marriage-like relationship for at least 2 years. Okay, so haven't been to the altar, haven't been to a civil wedding, civil marriage, right? But in the eyes of the state, they are viewed as married. So what that means is a couple things have changed. The survivorship rules have changed. A couple things. If you look at the third paragraph, in your estate includes gifts of real estate. Any debt on the property stays with the gift. The estate no longer pays out the mortgage. So that has to be assumed. So I just wanted to share that with you. So if you have property that you have a mortgage on, that'll be assumed by the beneficiary of the estate. On the marriage-like relationship topic, if your son or daughter is in a marriage-like relationship, and you die, your estate is subject to being shared by the marriage-like relationship. Okay, so just to make you aware. All right, power of attorney. This is someone who can make some financial and legal decisions in your behalf. There are two types of power of attorney: with restriction or without restriction. With restriction is, a medical certificate or doctor's note is required for the power of attorney to be put in place. Without restriction, there's no restriction, essentially. Okay, and requires certainly a high degree of trust. Oh, and when there is a death, the power of attorney discontinues and the executorship takes over. Okay, advanced care planning. The Catholic Healthcare Association of British Columbia produces a document, Advanced Care Planning, a Catholic Faith-Based Perspective. This can be downloaded from this website URL in PDF form if you'd like to read it. The second one is called My Voice. Now Northern Health, I'm not sure if they publish it. This is published by Fraser Health in the Valley, but it's available electronically. It's a very good little booklet, the second one, because all the forms are in there. So if you want, as an example, a do not resuscitate order, that is a legal instruction. The forms are in here. You can execute it out of this booklet. Okay, so those are some things to discern.
Just to answer your question,
Sure.
Northern Health has it.
Northern Health, and is it called My Voice?
Yes.
Okay, and can you get it from?
You can pick it up just about at the hospital or in the healthcare facilities.
Okay, so Northern Health has this book available. It's called My Voice, and you can pick it up at hospitals and other medical facilities, okay? So that's available. I think in this day and age with medical assistance in dying, specifying your preferences and your instructions are all that more important. We're in an era of euthanasia and assisted suicide, so spelling out your instructions clearly. I've had these discussions with my father as an example. We've discerned that, what does end of life mean for him? He has a do not resuscitate order, and he will have a natural death. But we've also said that if he's in a coma or if he's on a machine, that we've discerned it together and talked about it in a mature way, that we would not continue his life on the machine unnecessarily. Okay, so that's natural. That's a natural end of life. So those are important discussions to have in this day and age. Okay, so we're going to switch over. So your task, just to finish it, a to-do list, read through your estate guide, complete the planning guide. If you haven't got a will, start discerning and making a will. And if you are updating a will, you have many things to think about. Who will be your executor, your guardians, power of attorney, and healthcare representation. Yes, sir.
In your opinion, is it better to have the executives, guardians, power of attorney to be distinct and separate people?
They can be one and the same, or they can be separate people. It's up to you.
It's entirely, so there's no like comparative benefit to having it all separate.
Now, if you have someone that you trust and who can do both, that's a good thing. Power of attorney is great when you're alive and you're in and out of the hospital or something like that. You need bills paid, right?
Yeah.
So, I used power of attorney when I went traveling. I went traveling for a year, so I gave power of attorney to a friend of mine so they could pay my visa bill,
Oh.
my big bills. Okay, so is there any other questions? This is just kind of a broad overview. I'd encourage you to do those things, talk things through with legal counsel. You can prepare a will. Do you have to have a will done by a notary, public, or a lawyer? Question. No, you don't. But what happens if you die and there's a search? You go to the bank, someone says, hey, I want to take money out for this person. What happens? We talked about that earlier.
They're gonna ask you to produce.
Exactly. So you need a witnessed will. The other thing, when you use a notary public or a lawyer, it gets registered. So the will gets registered. So when a search is done by a financial institution, they're able to find it. Okay, so it's registered. So it is an important step.
It's most important to destroy previous ones.
When you make a new will, good point. So the question is, it's important to the comment. It's important to destroy the old will. When you write a new will, the previous will becomes null and void.
I have my will made out already, but I'm just looking at the book, and you get your bank password and your all the different passwords you have. That's not part of the will. That would be part of your file for those who are going to look after your will. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I keep it there because there's so many LinkedIn and Facebook. I keep it more for like someone who just to share with you what happens in the garden. So we deal with at-need deaths quite frequently. The family comes in and they don't know what the wishes of the family are. They're scrambling around to find the will. They don't know where it is. We had one where a woman died, and the son who was in charge of her instructions, didn't know her instructions. So in kind of a state of the moment, he's decided to have her cremated. They found the will 3 days later. It says, I want a traditional funeral mass, and I want a full body traditional burial. So the other thing is make sure you share your will with your family or with those that would be responsible for supporting you. Okay, so let's switch over. While we're switching over, I'm going to give you a question to think about. When you die, are you leaving home or are you going home? When you die, are you leaving home or are you going home? Okay. And did everybody get their name in here? Okay, so let's do our first draw for a book.
Oh, we've got one more.
Okay, Richard, come in. Okay, the lucky recipient of our first book is Rose Palfy.
Oh,
Hey, Rose. Okay, so I'll speak to you a bit about, I'm Director of Catholic Cemeteries, one of my summer jobs as a young man was cutting grass at a Jewish cemetery. And it was kind of interesting learning the Jewish tradition, but I thought I'd never be working at a cemetery again in my life. And God's sense of humor was, I've been in this job 5 years, but before that I was working 7 years for market research for health. So I was helping people live longer, and now I'm in a ministry that tends to taking care of the family and those that are dying. Okay, so I didn't do a lot of adjustment to this. This is what I show people in the Lower Mainland, but there's a lot of good content in here about the funeral mass and things like that. So what I'll cover is a bit of information about cemeteries ministry, or end-of-life ministry, if you will, that's offered to us. Pre-need planning, what the main steps are, and how you go about making your plans here. So we've talked about the will. When you think of an estate is kind of an umbrella term that covers many things. So within that you have a will, and your will is a legal document for your financial instructions. Okay, so checked. But there's other things to think about. What are your healthcare instructions? When I die, what are my burial plans and intentions? And then what would be my funeral plans? So, a couple of years ago, I was back on holiday with my in-laws. My father-in-law was 84 at the time, and we just had a good discussion about this. He said, we'd like to, just talk about end of life and have a good dialogue about it. And do you have plans made, or where are you at? Is there anything we can help you with? He said, let's go for a drive. So we went for a drive to the cemetery. This is in St. Thomas, Ontario. And so he shows us, they had pre-purchased, pre-planned 2 plots, and they already had the stone chosen with the name Bilecki, a Polish family, my in-laws. And then when we went home and we're having a beer, and he says, come with me still. And he opens the closet down in the hallway, and he has a suit all picked out, and says, I want to be buried in that. So it was kind of a funny conversation, which we had a few laughs about. But he was probably a little, further along. He had thought all of these things through. He had worked with his parish on readings. He had discerned with his family what his intent was. He was at peace. And that was a wonderful place to be in, because when he died, my wife and I just could be present for the loss, to experience the beauty of the Mass, and everything was taken care of. So we didn't have to make 90 decisions about flowers and readings and things of that nature. So my hope for you is to consider making your plans. I'm going to show a video. The video pertains a lot to our ministry in the Lower Mainland, but I'd like you to pay particular attention to the funeral component to it, please. So if we could show Jasmine.
The most important thing in life is family. From the ones we've been given to the ones who are part of our community, these are the people we love taking care of. At Gardens of Gethsemane, we want to give you and your loved ones comfort and peace of mind. We help people make memorial plans, a wonderful way to give the gift of peace to your family, so they don't have to worry about things when that time comes. When you choose the Gardens, the proceeds stay in our Catholic family, helping to strengthen other ministries in our church. We are honored that we get to be part of those things too. Ultimately, we're an extension of your parish. The funeral mass is a beautiful way to experience the rituals, tradition, and beauty of the church that can help bring healing and offer hope in that difficult time. We bring prayer resources into the hands of your parish. During November, the month of remembrance, we make an even more intentional effort to pray for all souls. We're also inviting people to come and pray with us and each other here at Gardens. Every month we gather at Gardens of Gethsemane for a memorial mass together. It's an opportunity for families to commemorate the beauty of our faith and the meaningfulness of honoring those who passed away. This is not just a place to pray, but a community for continued support after the loss of loved ones. Having a loved one pass away can be very hard. We consider it an honor to bring comfort and peace to families during this process. We offer bereavement support, workshops, and other resources to help guide you through this difficult time. We know losing a child is especially hard, which is why we want to help ease the burden. Thanks to the Works of Mercy Fund, infant burial is free of charge in both Rachel's Garden and the new Jesus and the Children area. We've also partnered with Elizabeth Ministry to bring grief support to women and their families who've lost a child. The hardest part in making pre-arranged plans is starting the process. A pre-arrangement makes sure your wishes are carried out, spares your family from the stress of missing any details, and alleviates unexpected costs. Our advisors are here to listen and help you make the best plans so that you and your family are taken care of. Because after all, the most important thing in life is family.
So this is the patron of funeral directors, and it's our patron at the Catholic Cemeteries in Vancouver. But what did this guy do? What did St. Joseph there do? Excellent. He gave up his burial plot, his tomb for Christ. So Nicodemus went to Pontius Pilate and asked, may we have the body of Christ? He, St. Nicodemus, St. Joseph of Arimathea cleansed the body of Christ, shrouded, and tried it. So we jokingly say that St. Joseph of Arimathea had a pre-need plan, right? So he had a pre-arrangement. He was thinking ahead. So we asked Archbishop Miller for permission, and so he's the patron of our organization, but he's the patron of all cemetery directors. So the cemetery solution for you is Prince George. And Kim is here tonight to answer questions on that. And I have a bit of pricing, which I'll get to in a few moments. But beautiful cemetery, well kept, nice job. There's upright section, in ground, there's cremation and crypts, but we'll talk about pricing in a moment. So I like to show this. Often on a Sunday in Mass, we say the Reverence for Life prayer. And in the Reverence for Life prayer, there's a line that says, we revere life from conception till its natural end. So I like to show this because we're part of the sacramental journey that you're on in the church. You're conceived, you become baptized, so that's a sacrament. You go on, there's confirmation, so all along the way there's preparation for these steps and stages. Many of us go on, become married, or we go into vocational life. And then this ministry comes in the elder life, or the autumn's kind of stages of life. The church offers us the sacrament of the sick. So I had an operation 2 years ago, and I phoned my priest and I said, I have to go in for an operation. I had appendicitis, and he whizzed over and he gave me anointing. And we prayed together. It was a wonderful grace that's available to you. So you don't, sometimes there's a misunderstanding that, it's only a sacrament at end of life. No, it's a sacrament that's available to us anytime. So if you're sick, ask for it. The fathers would love to give that to you. We become involved because we help people make funeral plans. We operate the cemetery. You have cemetery services here. Your fathers here and at your parish are there to support you and answer questions about the funeral, about end of life. And we say life does not end, it continues. So life does not end, it continues. When there is someone at the very late stages of dying, sick and dying, there is the viaticum. So the viaticum, you'll see a priest will provide, it's called food for the journey. So there'll be final prayers, anointment, and there'll be viaticum. I have that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's food for the journey. So that's another wonderful gift our faith offers us. Okay, so how are we connected? For Prince George, so we have the Municipal Cemetery of Prince George. They offer some planning work. We'll talk about that in a minute, but Kim's available for appointments. She'll show you around and provide pricing depending on what you're interested in. When you say sacred burial space, so the Catholic Cemetery in Vancouver is blessed by an archbishop. For church cemeteries and other cemeteries, the father will bless the grave. So when there's an interment, the father will bless the grave. So the cemetery offers what's called opening and closing services, so it's preparing a grave and then closing it afterwards. And then there's memorialization, so brass marker or granite. I'm not actually sure, I'm not too familiar with what's offered, but you either have brass or granite essentially, flat or upright. Next person in the mix is the funeral homes. Funeral homes are licensed as are cemeteries. Cemeteries have to comply with the Consumer Protection BC and the cremation and what's it called? Cremation. There's an act that regulates our industry. So the funeral home is a licensed provider. They prepare the body, they provide transportation, they do certificates, they do obituary notices, and they're kind of the quarterback. So they schedule the burial, and they work with the parish on the funeral mass timing and so on. The parish offers the funeral liturgy. We'll talk about that in a second. They gather the community and offer support for the family, and they rally volunteers and many parishes offer bereavement support afterwards. So, most of our fathers have had pastoral care experience, and they extend that to the community. Okay, so a Catholic funeral and burial offers rituals with meaning, rituals that heal. There's a beautiful video on our website. I won't show it tonight out of interest of time, but there are three main components. There's the vigil, there's the funeral mass, and then there's the final interment. So the vigil is a gathering of the community, usually the night before the mass. Sometimes it's the morning before a mass or before the mass. And that is really to acknowledge the loss of the person and to gather support for the family. The funeral mass is the main liturgical celebration. We give thanks for the life, and we ask the Lord to accept the soul of the person. What I like to show here is that we come into this world in a baptismal pall, but we also leave the world in a baptismal pall. So that's a baptismal pall over the casket. So it's kind of a beautiful circle of life thing. But the other purpose of a pall is that it kind of levels everybody together, right? So if someone has a flashy casket or a basic casket, it doesn't matter. It's covered with a pall.
If somebody is cremated,
yes,
but they have been baptized, is there a symbol for that? Like a baptism, they don't have the pall over the urn, or what?
So, great question. So the teaching of the church is that Christ died full body. The readings are mostly related to the full body. So the church asks that the full body be present for the funeral mass with the cremation occurring afterwards.
If possible.
If possible, please. We also know there's exceptions to that. I know in the Metro Vancouver, you have to have permission from the Vicar General or the Bishop to have a mass with cremation or a liturgy service, a liturgy of the word service. Okay.
So it's not a funeral mass?
No.
But to answer more accurately the question of Bev, I asked Jasmine to get for me the CD. About 2 years ago, I made a presentation about the Greek Christian funeral liturgy. It's still on our website, www.pgdiocese.bc.ca, and it's also available on the CD or DVD format, where I have discussed the following: the vigil, the funeral mass, and the burial, but also a funeral liturgy with mass and funeral liturgy without mass. And at that time as well, I kind of addressed that question that in special situations and consideration, it is allowed, a permission is given that the cremation happens first, and then there is a celebration inside the church. Now, following the idea that whatever we, however we honor the body that's how also we will reverence the ashes, then the Paschal candle is also present. But we have not come to a point yet where there is something draped over the urn. But rather, what has been happening here in our diocese is that there is a small table in front with Paschal candle and the urn, and sometimes at the request of the family, there is a picture. And again, it may not 100% reflect what is on the ritual book, but meeting the, where the people are, we have used as well the incense and holy water for when the ashes is present.
And that is called a funeral mass? Or is it?
There is a choice. There is a choice. No one should be deprived of a funeral mass if it is requested, but there is a provision in the ritual book that says funeral liturgy at Mass and funeral liturgy outside Mass. So really, that's why planning is so important, because nowadays what is happening, and we made notice of this earlier, is that what was happening is that, the parents could be so faithfully going to church all throughout their lives, and then the children kind of fade away. Now, comes to the time when the parents die, there could be a feeling, and I know other priests could speak of their own experience. There could be a feeling that the children are hesitant to approach the church for funeral service or liturgy for their loved ones. So nowadays, you see in the obituary, no service at the request of, so that's why planning is important, and that you have to write that specifically on your own will to say, I want a funeral liturgy with Mass, or want funeral liturgy without Mass. So anyway, the CD that I'm referring to is here, An Evening of Reflection on Christian Funeral and Burial. So you can borrow it or you can access it through our website. Sorry.
I know, if you don't mind, is there specific things, if you are going with the full Catholic Mass, that the priest can let go of? Because when my mother died, there was only one practicing Catholic, and the rest didn't want the symbolism. They want their casket showing. They didn't want that on there. They didn't understand what it meant. They didn't want the water. They didn't want the casket stained. And they were coming from a place that was just heartfelt, but they didn't understand the fullness of the Catholic Church.
Good point. But with all due respect to
Yes.
where they're coming from and what is the church expects of us and what the church would like to do when we die, I think it should go with the actual planning before the funeral. I'm not claiming to be expert here, but again, what happens is when I am informed that somebody died, I meet with the family. And you meet where the people are, and the people would say, I say this with all due respect. For instance, with the First Nations, I tell them, you tell me what you want to happen, because I don't like surprises, because if you surprise me, I'll surprise you too. And so they just are honest right there. And if I sense that there is some aspect of the celebration that they are not sure of, or what does it mean, so then that's when I try to spend a little bit more time with them explaining it. Because what happened is when we just say, no, we will omit it because you don't understand, then we create another confusion to the rest other people who will come for the gathered community. How come that funeral is different than this one? So while we respect the context of each family, that there could be some people who already kind of fall away, we need to be firm with what the church teaches and try our best to communicate the message.
Thank you. So speaking of that, we created a beautiful thing called Understanding Symbols in a Catholic Funeral Mass. So this is over there on the table. It explains the purpose of a pall, why the priest wears white vestments, the cross, the paschal candle. So we've been encouraging our pastors to hand this out to people who are maybe not of the faith, because they could follow along and, oh, they see it, and there's a purpose for these things, and it's beautiful, you know, it does help. We hired the leading North American expert in bereavement. And let me share with you that secular, Catholic, whatever, there's a process that people go through when there's a death. You have to have, you know, acceptance of the loss. Some of you may have known Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work, you know, there's the 5 stages, Psychologically, you know, human beings, we go through those things. The funeral mass helps with that. The funeral mass offers healing, offers acknowledgement of death. So it's got beauty in terms of 2,000 years of history with that. So I'd encourage you to think of that and to ask for that for yourself, for those that are affected. The other document we have here over on the table, so help yourself, called Guidelines for Christian Burial. So you can read that through. It's got some good instructions and what are the instructions of the church, what are the various rights available to you. Every Catholic has the right to get buried. Every Catholic has the right to a funeral service. Burying the dead is a corporal work of mercy. Praying for the dead and praying for the living is a spiritual work of mercy. So it's an important part of our faith journeys.
I have another question.
Sure.
Okay. If you have a couple where one is a Catholic member, the other is maybe a member of another denomination or non-Catholic, and it comes time for the funeral, can the non-Catholic person be buried?
Sure. The cemetery available to you. Oh, okay, the question is, if there's a couple of mixed, you have a Catholic and a non-Catholic couple, and so the question is, can the non-Catholic get buried in the church? Is that correct? Okay. Father, do you want to answer that one? Or, oh. So there'd be a mass liturgy of the word, a service, or if they're baptized Christian, they can have a...
I have that experience in Smithers when I was a pastor there, and the wife is Catholic, but the husband is not. The husband passed away, and I need to provide a little bit more backup. The husband, though he's not Catholic, consistently comes to church every Sunday with his wife. And so comes when then he died all of a sudden, and so the family is asking me, can we have the funeral in the church? There is a provision in that ritual book that says even the people who belong to other churches, if so requested, we need to seek permission from the bishop to say if that could happen. And yes, at that time, I sought permission. It happened. To the family's surprise, there were even 4 priests at that funeral mass. You know, so yeah. So to answer the question briefly, yes.
And it's called the Guidelines for Christian Burial. So I know in the Lower Mainland, on the burial front, we bury all baptized Christians, Lutheran, Anglican, whatever, and we don't separate families. So if someone's married to someone who's followed the Muslim tradition, so we bury them, but we look for a Catholic connection. That's in the Lower Mainland. The funeral liturgy is a little bit different. So. Okay, so the final one is the interment prayer. This is the final prayers at graveside. Okay, so we'd like to encourage you to prepare the way you'll be remembered. To do that, it's a pre-arrangement plan. On Monday morning at the cemetery, we get 2 types of phone calls. At need or pre-need. At need is my mom died on the weekend, what do I do? No plans, so there's a lot of scrambling around to make arrangements and do things. The other one is, my mom died on the weekend, you know, I need to call the parish, I need to get the funeral home going, and I just want to give you a heads up. So a lot easier to work with. So we recommend that for our community that you make a pre-arrangement plan. It lessens the burden on the spouse and children, avoids emotional mistakes, you can choose your location together, and finances aren't impaired by illness. So some good reasons to do it. Here's the process we recommend. Discern your burial choice. The two basic choices are traditional or cremation. Traditional or cremation, because each one has a whole set of decisions related to it. After you do that, you would meet with the respective people. So in the case of cemetery space, you would meet with Kim. In the case of, I believe you have 2 funeral homes here. It's 2 or 1? Aspen? 3. You have 3 funeral homes here. So that's something you could meet beforehand, go shopping, see which one you like, which one might be, who's got good rates, who's got a good reputation. So those are things you can do. So you can do a pre-arrangement on your funeral services and a pre-arrangement on your cemetery space. After that, you document it. In the case of a cemetery space and your funeral plan, it is a legal document. This is your instructions. On a cemetery space, when you do it, you have to specify who the grave space is for and who has the rights to make decisions. So those are important things, just like a will. So you have a will, that's a legal document for your financial instructions. This is your legal document with your burial and funeral instructions. Okay, so burial options and prices. Not to feel overwhelmed on this, but just to give you a sense of what's available. I checked with Kim. Traditional in-ground casket burial. Your cemetery here offers crypts, which is a casket burial in a mausoleum type building. And thirdly, you have cremation burial. So the first one, I'll just give you the prices now. These is range, and again, where you go to the cemetery, what you do, whatever. Okay, so a traditional plot, upright. So that's with the stone upright, right? Snow's here. So in the wintertime, flat one's going to be covered with the snow. You can either decide upright, or you have to have a metal detector to find your grave. So upright is $4,700. So that's all your services. Part of your pricing is there's a portion of the price that goes into perpetual care trust. All cemeteries need to collect this trust money and put it in a trust account, so that when the cemetery is full and there's no more revenue, the trust fund takes care of the cemetery. Okay, so $4,700 for upright. The flat one is $4,377. Crypts are $11,000. And niches, which is stone front, is about $2,500. So again, what you see here is glass front, but those are in other spots. So they have stone front cremation. Do you have in-ground cremation?
Yes.
Yes, so in-ground, you can, just like a casket in the ground, you can put a urn in the ground, okay?
I was just going to say, I just phoned Kamloops Cemetery 2 days ago, and it was $1,400 just for a plot. Is that something more you're getting with this plot? Sorry.
Better earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's drier there.
No, it's just what about the cost? Because also in Kamloops, you can sell your plot, where here you can't. So if you paid $400 for it and it's worth $4,000, they'll give you $400 back. I bought a couple when my husband died. Plots.
We refund the money at the same price that you bought.
Yes, but what do you get for $4,300 here? I mean, or $700. I'm just curious about that.
That's your full, that's the opening and closing, that's the plot and the lining.
Okay.
That's it.
So it's a question for the folks at home. What do you get for your price? So a liner, which is a cement container. The casket goes in, protects the casket, keeps the ground from going down. The service to prepare the grave and to close it after, and the memorial marker. Plus your trust fund is in that, your care fund. Bargain. Now, I'm used to the Lower Mainland. Some of the corporates there are $35,000 for a plot. This is a bargain. Bargains.
Yes, those prices are going up everywhere.
Well, everywhere. Alrighty. Oops.
So if 4,700, that's the plot, but if you were getting if you want that stone on that with the writing, that's a lot more. Is that
No,
over and
bargain,
above?
this is fully loaded.
That's the marker, the headstone is over and above.
It is, yes.
Oh, it
Over
is,
and above.
okay,
And
sorry.
what do they cost?
So I didn't want to.
That I don't know.
I just got one for my dad for about 1,000, a plain one. Flat? Yeah.
It could cost up to, because I just purchased
Yes,
one.
I would think you did.
And it could cost up to $5,000.
Okay, and that's before the professional fees. For British Columbia, the average, the funeral services. So the funeral services are a different organization. So you have 3 funeral homes. The average cost for funeral service now is $5,600. $5,600. So that's the professional fees, the transportation, all that stuff. So you need to add this with that. So you better plan on, if you're going cremation, $2,500 plus your funeral services, $5,000 to $7,000. If you're going traditional, you need to plan on anywhere from 8 to 13, something like that. Okay.
Can I just mention too,
Sure.
there's money through, if you're really, really poor, they'll pay for the burial. I forget what's through the social services.
Social services.
Yeah, and you just have to get in, make sure you get in there on time.
Okay.
Before you,
And anybody who's a veteran,
well,
Veterans
not
Affairs
person
will
dead.
help if you have veterans.
I have experienced journeying with a family, and I think the ministry is called Ministry of Last Resort. And you have to really prove that you don't have money.
Yes, yeah.
So,
Well, this is another wonderful thing that community can look at for fundraising, right? So we've done that. We have a Works of Mercy Fund. We raise money to help with refugee burials, things like that. Do you have? I am sure that Kim, there was someone who was very much in need. That would be helpful.
Can I just ask something? I don't know. Actually, years ago, when my husband died, Elizabeth Coop, or whatever she.
Kubler-Ross?
No, she worked up at the hospital here. She worked with people who were dying and that. Zook, yes. And she said that we don't have to do everything that the funeral homes say. Like, we can make our own box. We don't have to be embalmed. You don't have to go through all of that money and cost. And most people don't know that. They think that they have to do that. And, yeah.
Yeah, that's
So-
good. That's another reason to do it on a pre-arrangement basis, because
Right.
you can shop around, you can learn from other people's experience. You don't want to do that stuff at need, right?
Right, and
Because you're kind of like, oh, okay, I guess it's.
And you can still do the old-fashioned way like they did. Like, she showed videos about how a little girl that died, and they could bring her into her home, like, and have like a wake for a while so that the family could be there, and they had a social worker. And there's a lot that we don't know that we can do.
Yeah, be very personal.
that's not old-fashioned for us Filipinos. We still do that.
That's great, yeah.
And the First Nations too. They
Yes.
do that.
Yeah.
The wake is at home.
Yes.
And again, I experienced with the funeral home here that when that is pre-arranged, they cater to that needs as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Alrighty, just moving along. I have one I just thought I'd show you. We just launched something, but let me talk to you about Holy Angels for a second, because I met with Father Horgan, the author of this book. The angels are mighty spirits sent by God to bring His message of life, grace, and peace, to guide us on the path to holiness. The servants of Christ and the mystery of the church. Angels enlighten us, guide us, watch over us, defend us, and lead us on the path to eternal life. So they have an important role in helping us prepare for end of life and beyond. Many non-religious people believe in angels and look to angels as spiritual guides and friends. So when I was discerning with Father, I said, can you help us make the connection with angels and sick and the sick and dying and so on? So can the angels help the sick and dying and prepare the living for eternal life? The angels are by our side to help us to accept the task of dying, helping us to accept separation and parting, assisting us completing the spiritual and personal tasks of love that are part of completing our life on earth, and preparing our family and friends as well, ourselves, for our journey home to God. So that answers the question I posed to you at the beginning. Angels assist us to receive the sacrament and lift away burdens. So that's another aspect to our faith.
There's a question here that came from our online participant. Is there such a thing as a loaned out casket for the funeral and then cremation after?
Yes. So funeral homes can rent a casket, and they change the liner inside so that you're aware. Okay. So what they do is after the funeral services, they will adjust the body, and the body will go in another container for cremation. Cremation can be done in 24 or 48 hours. Is it pretty? You have a crematorium on your site, correct?
We do, which is owned by Asmund.
Yeah. So Aspen owns that crematorium, so they do a service right here. Okay. I think I got that. Okay, cremation for Catholics. Since Vatican II in early 60s, cremation is a viable means of disposition. But we've already talked about the Church seeks to have the full body present for the funeral mass, with cremation occurring afterwards. Okay. The body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, which is why we take great care in preparing the body at end of life and for its interment. What I'd like to share with you is a video on what the resurrection is. As followers of Christ, we participate in Christ's suffering, death, and resurrection. So what we did is there was a study in the States that indicated that Catholics really don't understand the full connection of the resurrection for what it means personally. So let's have a listen to this video, please.
Resurrection is something that Jesus did and experienced and offers to us. And so it is incredibly good news to know that God came to save us, but didn't just keep that to himself, but offered that to me and to everyone, that we can experience new life. And that's the point, I think, of life, is the restoration, experiencing new life. Christianity makes no sense without the resurrection.
St. Paul said that if Christ is not risen, our faith is in vain. So this is the great thing that we bring to the world, because it's when we face the reality of death that all of us share that in common, no matter who we are, no matter what race, which tongue, which tribe, which nation. And we proclaim, and the church has proclaimed for 2,000 years, with her own witness unto even the shedding of blood in her martyrs, the reality of this eternal life that's in Christ, and an eternal life that's connected to our bodies, that there is a resurrection of our body from the dead, not just a life of a spiritual kind of transition, but that our bodies themselves are called to this eternal life, that the very plan of God that's revealed in Jesus Christ is to redeem and regather a whole creation that has fallen away, and to reclaim it to himself and to vivify it, because he is the life-creating God. And in Slavonic we call him Životvoryaще Bog. It's a beautiful word, kind of rolls up your tongue. The idea of the life-creating God. That's who we Christians belong to. This is the great message that we bring to this world, that Christ is risen. And in him, we too will rise.
That Hebrews says that humanity has been kept in bondage by the fear of death. And so the bondage of death is the shadow that is cast over the whole human family. So you remove that bondage, there's freedom, there's a joy, there's a wonder and a wondrous disbelief. Wow, you mean there's no death? You suffer death. And the reality of faith gives you that assurance that even though you may die, like you said, because you believe yet will you live.
Jesus' resurrection has transformed our attitude towards death, or should transform it, because he's conquered death. And he's shown death to be what it truly is, a rebirth. That when we die, it's not the end. In fact, it's the beginning of a whole new experience, the beginning of a whole new creation, where we live in that fulfillment, that fullness of what we were created to be.
It's not just an event that happened sometime, somewhere, kind of a neutral event, but it's So in my facing death, He will be there.
In our tradition we say, Христос воскресе из мертвых, смертью смерть побрал, и сущим воровых живот даровал. Slava, the old Ukrainian language. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling death by death into those whose tombs give life. So that's where my perspective of death comes. Death still is terrible. Death still is an enemy of man. There's no question. That's the Christian perspective. But death has been overcome by Christ. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling death by His own death. Those whose tombs give life. So that I, who in my tomb will receive life by my participation in His victory over death. So it's in that way now that I approach the great mystery of death, as the church does, as a reality that remains what it is and yet becomes transformed for those in Christ as a passage into eternal life, a Pascha.
So on our website, rccav.org, I think it's on one of your handouts, there's 7 of those videos. They're beautiful. What will heaven be like? So you're welcome to go on there and learn more and to read some articles. One thing I didn't cover off on, I wanted to mention in cremation, scattering. Is scattering aligned with church teaching? No. So the church teaches that cremated remains are the human body in just another form. We wouldn't scatter body parts, so we don't scatter cremated remains. We keep remains together. And also we don't keep urns at home. We are encouraged to place urns in a place of permanence and a place of memorialization. Okay? We often hear stories about people getting their homes broken into, urns get stolen, they fall. So it's a good idea just to make sure urns are placed in a cemetery. That's why we have cemeteries. Alrighty, so we're almost done. Just a reminder, the steps are discern your choice, traditional or cremation. Meet with Kim. Meet with Kim for burial space. And for your funeral services, you have a choice of 3 funeral homes that you can discuss. Once done, a friendly reminder and encouragement to document your plans and discuss them with your family. It's not an easy discussion, but please discuss it with your family. It's very important. Okay, I'm going to leave you with one last thing. When you meet with Kim in this case, they're there to help you. You can think about your own needs, or you want to buy multiple plots or make plans for the whole family. It's best to book an appointment because sometimes this takes an hour, hour and a half. And do you have payment options?
Yes.
Yes, flexible payment options. All right. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to just leave one thing with you. This is another gift. I love history and genealogy. I hired a genealogist and we put together 6 webinars. And this is a beautiful thing because one of the things you want to think about is your family story and passing on things to your generation and grandchildren. What was your life like? What were your grandparents' life like? So there's 6 webinars, a ton of tools. They teach you how to do some basic research work. So that's called My Family Story, and I just encourage you to do that for your kids and grandchildren. I did that. I found out my family comes from coal miners in Nova Scotia. Grandfather, 1792 in Canada, one of the early settlers here. And I have family that was horse handlers in Ontario, delivering Seagrams and stuff, booze on horse carts. It was kind of cool. So anyways, the thing is you're passing on kind of character elements of your family, and it's a nice thing to do. So that's there available for you as well. So that's it, and if you have some questions, we'll be here for a few minutes. Kim's here, and our card's here with the prices. And over on that table, we have a whole bunch of stuff. November is the month of Holy Souls. There's a few prayer books left. This is, we've been trying to bring back in the Lower Mainland Hallowtide. So there's Christmastide, Eastertide. There's another Triduum in our faith, which is beautiful. There's All Saints' Day. A saint is a hollow. All Hallows Eve, where the name Halloween comes from. So there's All Hallows Eve, All Saints Day, and All Souls Day. So that's the Triduum. And it kicks off the month of Holy Souls. And we're called to visit a cemetery that month and to pray for the souls in purgatory, to pray for those that have gone before us. So here's a prayer book. You're welcome to it. There's only a couple left, and help yourself to that. Okay? So I think with that, we'll call the evening to conclusion, but be available for questions. Father?
I'd like to take this time to express our gratitude to our speaker, to Peter Nobes, for coming to the Diocese of Prince George to kind of bring to our attention the need and importance of planning for our funeral. As scary as it could sound, but it's a reality that we also need to face as we journey through life. So on behalf of Bishop Jensen, the Presbyterate of the Diocese, and the lay faithful are gathered here tonight, thank you, Peter, and blessings on your ministry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you as well to all of you for coming tonight and for participating. We conclude with a prayer. Please rise. Salve Regina, Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, espes nostra salve, a te clamamus, exules Filii, a te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in ab lacrimarum vale. Ea ego, advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordias oculos, ad nos converte. Et Jesus, benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostendens. O clemens, o mia, o nucis, Virgo Maria. The Lord be with you. May the souls of all the faithful departed to the mercy of God rest in peace. May Almighty God grant us a restful night and a peaceful sleep. Amen.
Bob Bagno? Bob Bagno?
Whoa.